Cabal split, unable to act despite deadline. Benjamin Fulford, April 22, 2014. It is now clear that the cabal that has ruled the West is in disarray and is unable to act despite a very real surrender deadline given to them. The European power brokers like the Pope and the Queen support world peace and a campaign to end poverty and stop environmental destruction. However, Rockefeller, Bush and the other American oligarchs are acting like deer frozen in the headlights, unable or unwilling to take action. The same can be said of the heads of the Pentagon and the agencies. Let there be no doubt about it, the United States of America has degenerated into a rogue nation ruled by Satan-worshipping gangsters and is the black hole from which most of the world's misery emerges. Removing the public face of the U.S. oligarchy, Barack Hussein Obama, raises the question of, what do you replace him with? If the heads of the military-industrial complex do not act with a unified plan, the answer is likely to be chaos, turmoil and possibly even civil war in the U.S. The best hope now lies with the state governments who now have the required two-thirds support to demand a conference to rewrite the Constitution of the United States of America. That conference could be used as the means to set up an interim government with the power to clean out the filth that festers in Washington, D.C. Also, talks with various factions within the U.S. military-industrial complex reveal a surprising amount of agreement on key issues. The problem seems to be one of egos and rival institutions vying for power rather than disagreement over what needs to be done. Here are some of the main points everybody agrees on. 1. There should be a jubilee, a once-off write-off of all debts public and private. That is a no-brainer that would immediately end the ongoing U.S. depression. 2. There needs to be a distribution of assets. Most of the Fortune 500 companies are controlled by the 7 families that founded the Federal Reserve Board. The concentrated ownership is hidden by foundations and obscure accounting. These families mostly did not create the companies they own, rather they acquired them through murder and theft. These assets need to be either redistributed or put into a public fund and managed on behalf of the American people. 3. The Congress, the Senate, the Supreme Court and the White House in Washington, D.C. are nothing more than a heavily bribed acting troupe and need to be replaced. The umbilical cord of linking money and politics needs to be severed. 4. Once Washington is cleaned up, the government needs to start issuing money instead of the privately owned Federal Reserve Board. 5. The media monopolies need to be broken up and the American people need to be told their true history. This is the broad consensus that can be found inside the United States, especially inside the military and the agencies as well as within most state governments. The United States is ready to once again become an independent nation. Seen from outside of the United States, however, a very different picture emerges. First of all, while Europeans and Americans constitute about 1/5 the world's population, they control 4 out of the 5 vetoes at the United Nations Security Council. This means the UN is still a European instrument of colonial control. That has to change. The other thing that has to change is the global financial architecture. If the Republic of the United States of America is restored and issues its own currency, then a new institution needs to be set up to manage the internationally held and traded U.S. dollars. The World Bank and the IMF are not up to the job and there is no sign whatsoever that the Europeans and Americans will give up their control of these institutions. Even the reformed voting structure planned for the IMF, and blocked by the US as mentioned last week, would leave Europeans in charge. For that reason there are negotiations going on to set up an entirely new institution that would make the IMF and World Bank largely irrelevant. This is not going to happen overnight because new systems and computer networks need to be set up independent of the US-dominated and thoroughly hacked SWIFT international payment system. Here the Europeans, Russians, the Middle Eastern oil exporters and the Chinese are in broad agreement. It will take a couple of years to build up, however, so do not expect a sudden change on this front. Nonetheless, the first big step, for Europe to pay for Russian gas in euros instead of US dollars, is already in the works. That will leave the US corporate government headed by Barack Obama, or whatever his name is, extremely isolated. Perhaps that is why Obama is vicing US Asian colonies of Japan, South Korea, the Philippines and Malaysia this week to try to extort some money to keep the US corporate government from collapsing. The Japanese police agency sent somebody to visit the WDS to ask about the Obama visit. He was told the police should arrest Obama on charges of mass murder and fraud as soon as he stepped foot in the country. He was also told that slave Prime Minister Abe should also be arrested for election stealing and accepting foreign bribes to betray his country. The U.S. agencies and military based in Japan would be the heroes of the human race if they agreed to help the Japanese police to make the arrests. If the Japanese and U.S. 7th Fleet lack the courage to make this move, then perhaps the Malaysians will do it. Arresting Obama would be the trigger that would bring about world peace and vastly accelerate the positive changes taking place on this planet. However, it is probably wishful thinking. Instead, according to an Asian-based CIA source, Abe and Obama are going to preside over some provocations and incidents aimed at ratcheting up tension in East Asia. Obama wants to start a Ukraine-like situation in the region, was how he put it. Speaking about the Ukraine, the P2 Lodge sent this writer a video clip of a police chief being beheaded in eastern Ukraine. This is the same satanic mercenary army that has been carrying out atrocities in Iraq and Syria. Rest assured, these scum are being systematically hunted down and slaughtered. The CIA chief visited Ukraine recently because 20 of his Greystone, Blackwater, She, Academy murderers have recently vanished. They will continue to vanish until these criminals are all gone. There is also evidence that some sort of major counterattack against the Cabal has begun in Asia. The ongoing swarm of earthquakes hitting New Guinea are taking place in an area known to host a Nazi submarine base. Also, in China, over 1,000 officials linked to the Cabal have been executed since Xi Jinping came into power, according to a Chinese government official. Finally, to conclude, Japanese TV was set to broadcast a 9/11 truth documentary during prime time while Obama was visiting the country. However, the producers were told the time was not yet ripe. We are to hold our fire until we can see the whites of their eyes. There is no sense in going off half-cocked. When the white dragon moves, it must be absolute and overwhelming.